Hey everyone, I hope that you're doing well. I just wanted to check in now that I have read through the discussion contributions for Module 6. Um, and so I've added some things there. I'd love to hear your ideas to keep those conversations going. Once again, I just have really enjoyed the discussions that we've had, whether on Twitter, the discussion board, or Medium over the last few weeks. I know that this class is a whirlwind, and I appreciate all of your hard work and your effort. If there's anything I can do to help, if you've gotten a little behind, please reach out and let me know how I can support you and how I can help you so that we can finish this course strong. We have a week left. The last day of class is July 28th. So you have through the end of the day on the 28th to complete your final project. Of course, we're working on Module 7 today through Saturday. You'll have your last blog post there. Do remember, if you're one of our grad students in the section 516, or I should say 566, excuse me, of this class, you'll also need to read Elaine Carey's Plaza of Sacrifices. Hopefully you've been reading that already. It's a great book looking at issues of gender, the notion of the revolutionary family. That's another one of those mythic ideas that Benjamin didn't engage with a lot, but how the events of 1968 really pushed back against a lot of the revolutionary rhetoric and the power of the PRI. Yet she also shows how, even though Mexico was transformed and student movements transformed Mexico in so many ways, the PRI was able to hold on to power, and so she outlines that as well. So some things to think about as we shift our attention to that question of whether the revolution has legs still. And of course, as I mentioned in Module 7, that question comes from a newish book on the revolution by Gil Joseph and Jürgen Buchenau, who are two but two well-known and renowned scholars of the revolution, still working today. So do let me know if you have questions. A couple of you have reached out about options of doing research projects instead of the underdogs for the final. Again, that's something you can do if you would like. It's also more than fine to do a project on the underdogs. It's a great book. I recommend it. It does fit in nicely and kind of close up the study that we've done pretty nicely. So again, that's something that you can think about, but if you do want to go the research route, let me know, and I'm happy to give you some ideas. The idea there is that you will research something that you would like to learn more about or that you wanted to get into in a bit more depth than we were able to. The topic is wide open with the caveat that it has to do with the Mexican Revolution. So you can look at any aspect of the revolution, even things that we weren't able to touch on in our class. So that's what's coming between now and the end. I did want to just say a couple of things about the Mythic Revolution, about historical memory. This is the book that I kept referring to, Silencing the Past by Michel Rolph-Trouillot. He was an anthropologist, a Haitian anthropologist, who had a position at Johns Hopkins. I was spacing on that name for a second, during his academic career. But he did a great job of thinking through theories about history. One of his ideas about historical study was recognizing that even though in English and in many languages we use one word, of course German's an exception, but we use one word for history, when it has a lot of different connotations. It can often mean what happened or that which was said to have happened. And so these are some ideas that I kind of threw into our discussion, especially as some of you pointed out, Benjamin building on Hans Kellner's idea that historical events can't speak for themselves, but they are represented. That's paraphrasing pretty roughly. But that's, again, the ideas here is that humans are historical actors. We are also narrators. Sometimes we're both. And so what does that mean in terms of trying to parse out what history is, what it means, and what actually happened in the past. It also helps us to see how different people have constructed certain historical narratives for certain reasons. So Benjamin's talking about the ascendancy of the Pri, of their hold on power throughout the 20th century, the ways that they gained legitimacy by appeals to the revolution, by performances, by memorials, by the monument to the revolution, by what is written in history books. Those are ways that power is constructed. And along with that, something that Trouillot talks about is the silences that accompany that that kind of incomplete axiom that history is written by the victors. So Trouillot reminds us that if we're thinking that way, we need to take that a bit deeper. We need to talk about, who are the victors? How did they become such, or how are they seen as people with power in a particular society? What is the basis of that power? And how did they construct those narratives? Because when we look at how historical narratives were actually constructed, how history works, rather than what it is, that's where we can see power at play, and that's when we can figure out where those silences are. So history is also a bundle of silences to be recovered. Silences meaning perspectives that weren't included, that were left out either on purpose or inadvertently. Both of those things can happen. As I wind up here, I did want to show you one other book. I'm going to put a link. I'll probably carry over an older blog post that I had written in the past to our Medium site, so that you can read it if you're interested, because it gives a little synopsis of what was going on in this book. This is The Posthumous Career of Emiliano Zapata, written by Sam Bronk. This is his second book. His first book was a biography of Zapata. And in The Posthumous Career, as it sort of indicates, he's doing kind of the same thing that Benjamin was doing. And so in the past, I've assigned Bronk. I chose not to this time because Benjamin's a lot shorter. It has kind of a wider breadth, and it's far less theoretically dense. I love Bronk's book, but it can be a little dense here and there, because he's trying to bring together not only some of the theorists and ideas that Benjamin was looking at, but also some of the ideas that I was talking about in Trouillot's work, as well as the notion of hegemony, which is a way of looking at how power functions. The notion of hegemony is traced back to Antonio Gramsci, but it was also used by Gil Joseph and Daniel Nugent. We read a little excerpt from their edited volume at the very beginning of our class. They look to hegemony as a way of seeing power not just as a top-down sort of phenomenon, but looking at the ways that power is negotiated, right? So people in the countryside, people in urban areas, laborers, even under the Pri, they negotiated what the messages were that were coming from Mexico City. And so in The Posthumous Career, then, Bronk looks at memories and images of Zapata during his lifetime and since his death to see how there were official images of Zapata that were sort of co-opted by the state in ways that we were thinking about with Benjamin in building an official history of La Revolucion. But he also looks at the ways that people didn't just accept those at face value in different places throughout Mexico, right? So they had their own understanding of Zapata. They didn't just grant that to the state, and that's one of the ways that we can see hegemony in action. So I will leave that here. I hope that you're, again, having a good week, a good afternoon. Please check in with me if you could use any help, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed as we're getting toward the end of the course. I'm here to support you and help you to learn as much as you can and have the best experience that you can studying the Mexican Revolution.